You know those moments in life when everything seems perfect, and then one petty power trip turns it all upside down? That's exactly what happened to Sarah, a hard-working community manager in a sprawling Florida-gated neighborhood called Willow Creek Estates. Sarah had been running the show there for over a decade, keeping the pools sparkling, the lawns manicured, and the residents mostly happy. But when the HOA president, a guy named Victor, think of him as the ultimate control freak with a clipboard and a superiority complex, decided to fire her out of the blue while she was sipping margaritas on a much-needed beach vacation, he had no idea he was lighting the fuse on a revenge plot that would shake the entire community to its core. Stick around, because this tale of betrayal, clever maneuvering, and sweet legal justice is one you'll want to hear all the way through. Have you ever been stabbed in the back by a boss who thought they were untouchable? If so, you're going to love how this unfolds. Sarah's story starts in the heart of suburbia, where palm trees sway lazily and minivans line the driveways. Willow Creek wasn't just any HOA community. It was one of those upscale spots with tennis courts, a clubhouse that hosted wine tastings and rules about everything from fence heights to holiday decorations. Sarah, in her mid-40s with a no-nonsense attitude honed from years in property management, was the glue holding it all together. She knew every resident by name, Mrs. Jenkins with her yappy chihuahua, the young couple in Lot 42 who threw epic barbecues, even the grumpy retiree who complained about kids on scooters. Her job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and she took pride in making the place feel like home for everyone. Victor, on the other hand, was the elected HOA president who treated the position like his personal kingdom. He was a retired accountant in his late 50s, the kind of guy who wore polo shirts tucked into khakis even on weekends, and he had a habit of micromanaging everything. Sarah had clashed with him before, small stuff, like when he insisted on approving every newsletter she sent out, or vetoed her idea for a community garden because it might attract undesirable wildlife. But she always bit her tongue, figuring it was part of the gig. Little did she know, Victor had been gunning for her for months, jealous of how the residents adored her more than him. It all kicked off last summer. Sarah had finally booked a 2-week vacation to the Keys, her first real break in years. She'd saved up for it, dreaming of turquoise waters and fresh conch fritters. Before leaving, she tied up every loose end. The annual budget was submitted, the vendor contracts renewed, and she even left a detailed handover for her assistant. As her plane touched down in Miami, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. But back in Willow Creek, Victor saw his opportunity. He'd been stewing over a minor incident where Sarah had overridden one of his petty fines on a resident for having a slightly overgrown hedge. "She's undermining my authority," he'd mutter to his cronies on the board. The day after Sarah left, Victor called an emergency board meeting. "Sarah's been slacking," he lied, pulling out fabricated complaints he'd solicited from a couple of his buddies. "We need fresh blood." The board, mostly yes-men who'd rather golf than argue, nodded along. By evening, Victor had drafted a termination email. He hit send without a second thought, firing Sarah effective immediately, citing performance issues. Her access to the community email and systems was cut off before she even unpacked her swimsuit. When Sarah checked her phone poolside the next morning, her jaw dropped. Fired over email while on vacation? The betrayal stung like salt water on a fresh cut. She tried calling Victor, but he blocked her number. Her assistant whispered over a quick text that the board was already interviewing replacements. What would you do if your livelihood got yanked away like that, right in the middle of what was supposed to be your escape? Sarah could have sulked, updated her resume, and moved on. But no. Anger bubbled up, mixed with a fierce determination. She wasn't just any employee. She knew Willow Creek's operations inside out, including the skeletons in its closet. And that's when the idea hit her. If they wanted to play dirty, she'd play smart. Legally smart. Back home a week early, vacation ruined, Sarah dove into research mode. She pored over her employment contract, the HOA bylaws, and state laws on community associations. Florida has strict rules for HOAs, and Sarah remembered every detail from her certification courses. Turns out her firing wasn't just rude. It was potentially illegal. The HOA hadn't followed proper procedure. No written warnings, no performance review, nothing. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Sarah had been the one handling all the sensitive stuff, vendor payments, resident disputes, even the community's insurance policies. And here's where it gets juicy. She still had access to something crucial, the master keys and codes for the community's infrastructure. No, she didn't go rogue and change locks or anything criminal. Sarah was too clever for that. Instead, she realized she held the keys, literally and figuratively, to the community's digital backbone. Before her firing, she'd set up automated systems for everything from gate access to pool maintenance schedules. And in her handover notes, which Victor had ignored in his haste, she detailed how to manage them. But Victor, in his arrogance, hadn't bothered to transition properly. So, when things started glitching, the community ground to a halt. First, it was the front gate. The electronic system, which Sarah had programmed, began malfunctioning. Residents couldn't get in or out without manual overrides, causing massive backups during rush hour. Victor blamed it on a technical issue and called a repair guy, but the contractor needed admin credentials that only Sarah had updated recently. Then the clubhouse reservation system crashed. Wedding receptions and yoga classes canceled left and right. Residents started grumbling on the community Facebook group. "What's going on?" "This never happened under Sarah." Victor tried to downplay it, but panic set in when the irrigation system went haywire, flooding several lawns and turning the pristine greens into muddy messes. Sarah watched from afar, sipping coffee in her living room as the complaints poured in. She wasn't sabotaging anything. That would be illegal. No, she was simply not helping. Legally, as a fired employee, she had no obligation to assist, especially since they'd cut her off without severance or notice. But Victor, desperate, finally reached out via a lawyer's letter demanding she hand over all proprietary information. Sarah smiled. This was her leverage. She consulted her own attorney, a sharp local expert in employment and HOA law, who confirmed her plan was airtight. "They're in breach," the lawyer said. "You can negotiate from strength." So Sarah fired back a counter-demand, reinstate her with back pay, apologize publicly, or she'd withhold the critical access codes and documentation needed to fix everything. It wasn't blackmail. It was a legal standoff. Under Florida law, HOAs must maintain essential services, and by firing her improperly, they'd created their own mess. Sarah's hostage situation was metaphorical. She was holding the community hostage by virtue of their own incompetence, forcing them to confront the chaos without her expertise. As days turned to weeks, the pressure mounted. The pool pump failed next, turning the water a murky green just in time for the 4th of July barbecue. Residents were furious. Emails flooded the board, demanding Victor's head. One outspoken homeowner, a lawyer himself named Tom, started a petition to recall the entire board. "This is ridiculous," Tom posted online. "We pay dues for this." "Bring back Sarah!" Victor, sweating bullets, tried to hire a new manager, but who wants to step into a dumpster fire? Interviews fell through, and temporary fixes cost a fortune. Sarah, meanwhile, used her downtime wisely. She networked with other HOA professionals, sharing anonymized versions of her story on forums, gathering advice and even support letters. She documented everything: emails, timelines, even screenshots of the community's social media meltdown. Her curiosity about how far Victor would go kept her engaged. Would he cave or double down? Turns out he doubled down, accusing her of theft in a nasty letter. Big mistake. That opened the door for Sarah to file a defamation suit, adding more fuel to the fire. The turning point came at a packed town hall meeting. Residents crammed into the clubhouse, air thick with tension and the faint smell of chlorine from the neglected pool. Victor stood at the podium, red-faced, trying to spin the narrative. "We've had some hiccups due to former staff issues," he stammered. But Tom interrupted. "Hiccups? My car's stuck at the gate every morning. And I hear Sarah was fired without cause. Is that true?" Murmurs turned to shouts. Victor faltered, and that's when Sarah made her entrance. Uninvited but unstoppable, she walked in with her lawyer holding a stack of papers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah said calmly, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. "I've dedicated years to this community, and I was dismissed without warning while on vacation. Now, you're all suffering because of poor leadership. I have the solutions to fix everything. The codes, the vendor contacts, the backup plans. But I won't hand them over until justice is served." The room erupted. Some cheered, others demanded explanations from Victor. He tried to eject her, but the crowd wasn't having it. In that moment, Sarah held the power. The community was hostage to the board's ego, and she was the key to freedom. Behind the scenes, negotiations heated up. Victor's lawyer offered a settlement, severance pay, but no reinstatement. Sarah countered. Full back pay, a public apology in the newsletter, and Victor's resignation as president. She backed it with evidence of his mismanagement, including emails where he'd admitted to fabricating complaints against her. The board, facing potential lawsuits from residents for failing to maintain services, caved. Victor resigned in disgrace, slinking away to his condo amid whispers of good riddance. With a new interim president, a reasonable resident who'd supported Sarah, the community bounced back. Sarah was rehired as a consultant at double her old rate, fixing the systems in days and implementing reforms to prevent future abuses. The gate hummed smoothly, the pool sparkled, and residents threw a welcome-back party in her honor, complete with fireworks and stories of the great HOA hostage crisis. Looking back, Sarah often laughs about it over coffee with friends. "I didn't set out to hold anyone hostage," she'd say. But sometimes standing up for yourself means letting the chips fall where they may. It's a reminder that in the world of HOAs, where rules can feel like chains, a little knowledge and a lot of resolve can turn the tables. If this story resonated with you, maybe you've got your own tale of workplace revenge or HOA headaches, drop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you'd handle a firing like that. Don't forget to like if Justice Served made your day, subscribe for more real-life inspired dramas, and hit that bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight. Wait, but that's not the end. Let's dive deeper into what made Sarah's plan so bulletproof, because there's more to this than meets the eye. You see, HOAs in Florida operate under Chapter 720 of the state statutes, which mandates fair employment practices for community managers. Sarah had kept meticulous records of her performance reviews, all glowing, and contrasted them with Victor's baseless accusations. Her lawyer pointed out that the termination violated due process, potentially exposing the HOA to wrongful dismissal claims that could cost thousands in legal fees alone. Moreover, the hostage aspect wasn't about withholding physical items. It was about intellectual property. Sarah had developed custom software scripts for the community's management app. Nothing fancy, just efficient automation she'd coded on her own time. Since the HOA hadn't compensated her for that intellectual property, she argued it remained hers. Legally, she could license it back to them, but only on her terms. This nuance turned the tables. Victor thought he was dealing with a disgruntled ex-employee, but Sarah was a strategic thinker with leverage. As the chaos unfolded, individual stories from residents added layers to the drama. Take Mrs. Jenkins, for instance. Her Chihuahua, Sparky, loved the dog park, but with the irrigation flood, it became a swamp. She cornered Victor at the grocery store, wagging her finger. "You fix this, or I'll sue for emotional distress. Sparky's traumatized." Or the young couple in Lot 42 who had to cancel their anniversary party because the clubhouse was offline. They started a viral thread on Nextdoor, tagging local news outlets, which picked up the story as HOA Nightmare, Fired Manager Holds Key to Community Crisis. Sarah, from her home office, monitored it all. She felt a twinge of guilt. After all, these were her neighbors suffering, but reminded herself it was Victor's doing. Her curiosity drove her to explore similar cases online, discovering forums full of HOA horror stories. One post about a California community where a manager sued for millions inspired her to bolster her case with precedents. She even reached out to a few posters anonymously, gathering tips on negotiation tactics. When the board finally met with her, the atmosphere was electric. Victor was there, glowering from the corner, but the new voices on the board, a diverse group including Tom the lawyer and a tech-savvy millennial homeowner, pushed for resolution. "We can't afford this downtime," Tom argued. "Property values are dipping already." Sarah laid out her terms again, this time with a PowerPoint presentation detailing the costs of continued disruption. $5,000 in emergency repairs, lost dues from unhappy residents moving out, potential fines from the state for non-compliance. Victor exploded. "This is extortion." But Sarah's lawyer shut him down. "No, it's restitution. Your client breached contract first." The board voted 4-1 to accept her demands, with Victor the lone dissenter. His resignation letter was curt, blaming personal reasons, but everyone knew the truth. As he packed up his office, residents lined the street, some applauding sarcastically. In the aftermath, Willow Creek transformed. The new president implemented transparency measures, open board meetings, anonymous feedback surveys, and term limits for officers. Sarah, now consulting part-time, trained her successor, a bright young woman eager to learn, ensuring the community wouldn't face such turmoil again. She even started a side gig advising other HOA victims, turning her ordeal into an empowering venture. But let's not gloss over the human side. Sarah's vacation firing left scars. She second-guessed trust in colleagues for months. Yet it also sparked growth. She traveled more, pursued hobbies like painting sunsets inspired by the Keys, and reconnected with old friends. The experience fueled her curiosity about law, leading her to take online courses in real estate litigation. Knowledge is power, she'd tell anyone listening, especially when dealing with tyrants in polo shirts. For the residents, it was a wake-up call. Petty complaints dwindled as people appreciated the behind-the-scenes work. The 4th of July bash, rescheduled, was bigger than ever, with Sarah as guest of honor. Toasts were made to the woman who held us hostage and saved us from ourselves. If you're still with me, think about this. In a world where HOAs wield so much control over our homes, stories like Sarah's remind us that accountability matters. Have you ever turned a bad situation into a win? Share in the comments. Your experiences make these tales even richer. Like if this epic revenge satisfied your sense of justice, subscribe for more, and let's keep the conversation going. See you in the next one. To really appreciate the depth, let's explore the legal intricacies that made Sarah's strategy work. Florida's HOA laws require boards to act in good faith, and Victor's hasty firing screamed bad faith. Sarah's contract included a clause for 30 days' notice, which they ignored, opening them to breach claims. Her withholding of information wasn't theft, because it was her proprietary knowledge. Courts have ruled in similar cases that employees own self-developed tools unless specified otherwise. She also leveraged the Fair Labor Standards Act, arguing unpaid overtime in her role, adding to her back pay demand. The defamation angle from Victor's accusations. That netted her an extra $10,000 in the settlement. Curiosity led her to dig into Victor's background. Turns out, he'd been ousted from a previous HOA for similar behavior, a fact she subtly leaked to the board. The community's response was fascinating. A subgroup formed a Sarah support squad, organizing carpools during gate malfunctions and potlucks to boost morale. One resident, a retired judge, offered pro bono advice, confirming her plan's legality. These alliances turned the hostage situation into a community bonding experience, ironically strengthening ties Victor had frayed. As for Victor, post-resignation, he moved to a non-HOA condo, vowing never to lead again. Rumors swirled. He started therapy for control issues, humanizing even the villain in this tale. Sarah's story isn't just revenge. It's a blueprint for empowerment. It sparks curiosity. What hidden leverage do you have in your own life? Ponder that as we wrap up. Thanks again for joining this deep dive. Your engagement keeps these stories alive. Comment, like, subscribe. Until next time.